Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another session of Q&A with the trainers. I'm Keith Glines here at the Hockessin Athletic Club, and I am joined by Clayton Emery and Dewey Lightcap. Today, guys, we are going to start off by saying what we always start off by saying, which is if you have any comments, if you have any questions, any concerns, likes, dislikes, pros, cons.
All right, we get it.
Anyway, if you have anything that you want to chime in with, please chime in, let us know. The more you comment, the better off it's going to be for everybody. As an example of that, we actually had a really good question and comment from somebody last week, so we're going to go ahead and tackle that as our topic for today. I'm going to go ahead and read it. You guys ready?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so you guys ready at home? Okay, cool, good. All right, sweet. So we're going to get right into this. So here is the question from Ron Herringslack. It is, I've been reading about workout design, specifically strength and hypertrophy training. The focus seems to be on the amount of weight and number of reps. If I perform the same exercise, say front lunges, and decrease the resistance, am I converting a strength exercise into a size exercise? For example, 10 lunges touching my knee to the floor versus 15 to 20 lunges lowering my knee to a point 12 inches off the floor. So I first want to say, Ron, great question. Thank you for participating in this with us. We love the question. We've been sitting here talking about it and kind of formulating our answer, so really kind of helped direct our conversation for the day. So really appreciate it. So guys, let's start picking this apart a little bit because Ron, we want to make sure we answer this in detail. Hopefully it's not too much detail, because
That's kind of our thing.
that's kind of our thing.
Well, why don't we just start by laying it out? We'll just kind of go over a brief overview, and then we can kind
Cool.
of just dive in. Is
Start.
that cool?
Cool.
So,
Let's lay it out.
so in regards to strength and hypertrophy, we're going to be talking about reps. We'll be talking about intensities, like the weight that you're supposed to use. We'll go over a little bit of range of motion, some sets, the rest period as well. All these things are very important, as well as the tempo of the exercise. So, should we just start with reps? Does that sound good?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of
down?
different variables that we're going to talk about. These are all the things that we can tweak, and probably even some more things that we could possibly tweak.
Yeah.
But these are the ones that we're going to tackle. So, and they help kind of make that line between what might be considered more of a strength exercise versus that hypertrophy exercise. Or, in case anybody doesn't know what that hypertrophy even means, that's about increasing the size of the muscle tissue. So think bodybuilder type of exercise where we're actually gaining more muscle versus an exercise where we're really focusing on just getting stronger.
All right.
All right,
Cool. So
There you go.
we'll start with reps. So when we're talking about repetitions, again, full repetition is one completion of the exercise. If you're doing a bench press, starting at the top, coming down, coming back to the top, there's your repetition. For strength, we're going to recommend slightly lower reps, right? We're going to look mainly something like 5 to 8 repetitions. And it's going to be different for everybody. I really love to work 5 reps when I work for strength, and I do as low as 3, but most of the time I stick to 5. Some people will go as high as 10. 5 to 8 is a really good recommendation, and it works great for most people. So you might find that you really like doing 8s. You might find that you really like doing 5s, but it's kind of a range, and you have to find where you're comfortable. So remember, with strength, we're going to stay lower, 5 to 8. Recommendation. If we're looking at hypertrophy, we might want to go as high as 20 reps or even more. Sure, you can do hypertrophy with something as low as maybe 12 reps, 15 reps, fine. 20 is going to be where we recommend. It's going to be kind of our guidelines for you guys. Now, there's a little bit more about that. We got to talk about kind of what you're getting at the end of that rep range. How you feel at the end of that rep range. Because, we could do 5-pound dumbbell curls 5 times and 20 times and maybe 50 times and keep going. And it's, you have to have a certain sensation at the end. So I'd kind of like to talk a little bit more about that. Do you want to start this one?
It's really, there's a couple words that we tossed around when we were talking about this. We use the word fatigue, right? Fatigue is kind of the goal that we want to get to, whether it's the 5 repetitions, the 8 repetitions, or the 20 repetitions. But we want to get to a level of fatigue, especially with the hypertrophy training, where we get to failure. meaning you do that 20th repetition, and there's just no way that you can do that 21st repetition and maintain good form, right? So form is actually kind of critical relative to all this. So we always want to make sure that people are using correct and proper form and posture while they're doing an exercise. So with hypertrophy, failure is really, really important. With some of the research that we looked at and have read through, that failure component is really important. So if you get to that 20th repetition, but you could do 30, well, that 20 repetitions isn't necessarily a hypertrophy exercise anymore.
Right. We're not working your body hard enough to get the kind of exhaustion we need in the muscle, right? And if we don't get that muscle exhausted to the right point, it's not going to have enough stress to adapt in the right sort of way. Hypertrophy is really this thing we call sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, right? And we're depleting all of the fuel that's inside the cell and causing it to say, hey, next time, how do we prevent being so fatigued? We need more fuel, and that's the adaptation that the body makes. And when it does that, those energy stores inside the muscle get bigger, and they fill up with more fuel, and that's what makes the muscle actually increase in size, right? So that's what we need to get to. 20 reps to failure. That's a good recommendation to start with. And you can't just day one, having never done lifting before, go right to failure 20 reps. We talked about progression before. Work on proper form first. Once you've got proper form, you can slowly build up to it. Don't just jump in head first. If you're experienced with weightlifting, you can go probably right into the 20 reps to failure. If you're inexperienced, work on form first, get to know your body, become a little bit more well-rounded, and then slowly work your way up to it.
Same thing's true with any strength adaptation that you want to gain. If you want to get stronger, make sure we're using proper form. And kind of work your way into that 5 to 8 repetition range, because we're starting to talk about using some heavier weight, something that's a lot more challenging for you. And if your target is 5, but really you can only do 4, you better have some help ready there for you to spot you, to make sure that you don't get injured and drop the weight on yourself or harm yourself in some way. So safety is really, really important, especially when we start increasing the load on somebody.
So should we start talking about the weight now?
Let's do it. Let's move on.
So I guess, of course, when we're doing our strength training, we're going to want to have heavier weights. We're going to want to have a higher load to get stronger. We're just going to need that extra weight there. With the hypertrophy, we don't need as high of a weight. We've read some cool stuff out there saying that you can be as low as, I'm just going to jump right into it. I'm just going to say 40% of a 1 rep max, right? It can be upwards to something like 75% of a 1 rep max. Now we have to explain what a 1 rep max is. So we had just mentioned, Keith just explained what failure is, right? Failing to complete, anything else. So of 20 reps, if you try to go for a 21st and you can't do it, boom, you failed at 20 reps, right? So a 1 rep max is the maximum amount of weight that you can move for 1 repetition. Meaning that if you're doing a bench press, you get the bar off, take it down to your chest, you press it back up, you go for a second one, you can't get it back up.
Can't do it.
That weight is your 1 rep max. Now, if you want to find out what your 1 rep max is, don't just get under a heavy bar and say, I hope I can do
I would
this.
recommend doing that.
Please don't do that.
There's a bunch of different protocols out there for figuring out what your 1 rep max is, for getting close to it, for estimating. There's some really cool charts out there where you can just do 10 reps and say, oh, this looks like it's about 50% of my 1 rep max. So if you guys really want to get into that, reach out to us. We can hand you that information. We can talk about that on a whole nother day, but it might be too much for this conversation to get into it. So we're going to try to just say that whatever weight, right, puts you to failure for those 20 reps will probably be within 50 to 75% of your 1 rep max when we're talking about that hypertrophy. Do you guys want to jump in here?
You want to take?
No, I think that was pretty good. I mean, and then for strength, it's like we said, the 5 to 8 repetitions, 85% of your one rep max. And the whole reason why it's heavier is because we're only doing 5 to 8, so you can increase that resistance and that force since the repetitions are lower. You're obviously not going to be most likely going to be able to do 85 to 90% of your 1 rep max 20 times. That's going to be pretty intense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I won't be able to do it.
yeah.
Talk about failure.
Yes.
You will fail to get to 20.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so we've got repetitions so far. So for hypertrophy, we want to do more repetitions with a little lighter weight. For the strength, the repetitions will be lower repetitions. The weight will be higher, right?
Yep.
Okay, so let's move on. What's next?
I would like to talk about sets. If we're going to be handling volume, right? Because Ron, in your question, you mentioned that when you were looking at strength versus hypertrophy, so it came down to weight, reps, like it was a little bit more about volume, right? So when we're calculating volume, sets is going to be hugely important. And when we get into the sets with strength, we have this kind of like law of diminishing returns, right? When we do the first set, we get a lot of bang for our buck out of that first set. When we do the second set, we get a little bit less bang for our buck out of that second set. And third set, it's probably, we're getting a lot out of those first 3 sets. But beyond that, we start to hit that law of diminishing returns, and we're just not doing ourselves any good. We're kind of wasting time. So if we're gonna have a recommendation for strength, for sets, right? 5 to 8 repetitions, 85% of your 1 rep max, 3 sets. If we're going hypertrophy, this doesn't happen, this whole law of diminishing returns thing doesn't happen until later on.
Yeah.
So first set, good. Second, third, fourth, fifth set, good. We're gonna recommend something like 5 sets.
Yeah.
You're gonna wanna have a lot of volume.
Yeah, the research that we looked at didn't look beyond 5 sets.
Yeah.
So it may actually be more than that. But the research that we found said 5 sets for hypertrophy. So it's kind of interesting that they're 2 different things. But like you said, we're looking for volume relative to the hypertrophy training. So.
And if we're to start doing some simple multiplication, right? If you're doing 5 reps like I do for 3 sets for strength, that's 15 total repetitions. But if I'm doing hypertrophy, 5 sets for 20 repetitions, I'm doing 100 total reps. So 15 versus 100 total reps, that is a very different level of volume. So if you want to get big, high volume, if you want to get strong, low volume, right? So
I'm impressed at how quickly you did that math.
I did math today, guys. I mathed well.
Did you prepare that ahead of time?
I had a calculator.
You probably did. All right, cool. So, awesome. Ron, hopefully we're on the right track with you, and hopefully we're kind of answering this question for you. All right, rest intervals. We want to talk about rest? It's kind of a big deal.
Do want to talk about rest.
All right, let's talk about rest.
If I'm gonna talk about rest, rest is, you need adequate rest. After you do a repetition, right? Let's take the hypertrophy case. We want to get you to failure. You should be tired. If you are using the right amount of weight for the right number of sets, you are getting to a point where you can't even complete another repetition. It's tough. You need adequate rest to make your second set count for anything. So how long do they recommend rest? In the studies we looked at, guys, just now, the most up-to-date thing we can find is about 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. So bring out your phone, get a timer, stopwatch, whatever you need. A song that's 2 minutes long. Listen to that in the interim. Something, you guys need to figure out a way to rest for 2 minutes. Breathe, shake, move, whatever you have to do, but rest for 2 minutes. And you're gonna do that in between each set. So if you're doing 5 sets and resting for 2 minutes in between each one, there's gonna be 8 total minutes in the interim between those sets where you're resting. Yeah. So you're not always constantly working, right? And does anybody wanna pick up for strength for rest interval?
So it's not gonna be that much different, right? We're gonna look at probably between 1 minute and 2. Again, just to make sure that you're recuperating from that stress that you just placed on that muscle tissue. The energy systems have a chance to kind of start to replenish a little bit. So rest time is really important. I think a lot of times people kind of bounce from one set right into the other and don't allow for ample time for their body to adjust to the stress that they're placing on it. So I don't know. I don't have anything else to say on that. Do you want to add anything to that? I'm gonna keep moving, make sure we hit the last.
Let's keep moving.
Couple points. So our last one, tempo. Okay, so tempo for the exercise. So we have 2 different types of muscle contractions, right? We've talked about that before. If we're doing something like a bicep curl, where we come up this way, that's called the concentric. And as we lower the weight back down, that's an eccentric. And it really seems to be, for hypertrophy training, really important that the lowering of the weight, the eccentric component of the movement, is slower. The slower, the better. So we kind of figured that maybe a ratio of 2 seconds coming up and 4 seconds going back down would be ideal for creating an environment for your body to create this adaptation that we call hypertrophy.
Yeah.
You guys want to tackle the strength?
Sure. All right, I'll take it. So when we're looking at tempo for strength training, we don't need to emphasize the eccentric nearly as much. right? So in the hypertrophy case, 2 to 4, we're doing twice as much time spent eccentrically contracting through that weight as we are concentrically. Now when we're looking with strength, these can be a little bit more even. So I mean, you could even probably go a little bit more explosive with your concentric, right? You could do a 1 second explosive repetition out, right? And then maybe it's like a 2 second coming back down or a 3 second coming back down. Guys, you're still moving a lot of weight, so you do need to control it. Take it slow with that weight. When you're going eccentrically, it's always important to have control. If you're like I'm just kind of doing the bench press example, but you'll see a lot of guys bounce a bar off their chest. They're not even really lifting the full weight, right? Also, as that weight accelerates down and you have to stop it, you have to first decelerate it, then stop it, then re-accelerate it. That can put a lot of stress and trauma on your ligaments and your tendons and all those passive tissues, and that's where we can be very likely to get things like injuries and tears. So always control it. But with the strength training part, we can probably do shorter tempos, we can move faster. So a 2 to 2, a 1 to 2, 1 to 3. And guys, those are seconds, you know, concentric, eccentric. Those are going to be kind of our recommendations. You'll feel it out, figure out what works best for you, but that's kind of what we're going to recommend.
Cool. All right, so we hit a lot of topics, hit a lot of variables relative to strength training for both strength gains and hypertrophy gains. So Ron, hopefully that answers your question. Again, we really appreciate you participating in this with us.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Really appreciate it.
And anybody else, if you have questions or comments or anything, again, feel free. Ron left this question behind last week after this aired live. So if you're watching this and you have a question, we will address it. So just want to give proof to everybody that we will go back and we do check and we will answer questions. So, the last thing before I go, I want to just kind of comment that we did get that research from the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. So that was our source for all the information that we shared today. So anyway, cool. All right, guys, thank you for checking this video out, and hopefully we'll see you all again here next week.
Take care, guys.